let me take you through this entire set here. And these represent, where you see the asterisks, the parts of the contract that we've proposed that are must-haves for us. I don't really expect you to respond in entirety to all of it at this particular point, but let me just go through it and talk through a little bit of it as well. Okay, so the first must-have is in Article 2, the bargaining unit work. That's the clause that we had moved up from a prior version of the contract or proposal. Article 4, you know the career service manual has been a work in progress for a while, so to further delay modifications to it, we don't think any of the modifications to it you'd really have a problem with. But it has to be, the clause as amended from time to time is very important to us. Article 9, discipline for just cause. I've specifically asterisk subparagraph B. Okay.
And then G also.
And on the next page, G. These are important operational issues for us. I didn't mark anything on 11, it just happens to be on the page with 13, but I'm not clear whether your comment regarding the contract was still related to a 3-year contract or not.
Yeah, we're interested in it.
Okay, so we've got to think about that just a little bit,
Mhm.
because we're going to be leaving some things on the table, I suspect. Not sure we want to leave them on the table for 3 years.
Right.
But Article 13, performance evaluation. This is just to emphasize the fact that this is the tie into the wage article. Nothing more specific than that. Because that's referenced at the top of the next page in the D part, performance evaluations, and then cross-references Article 41. Then on Article 14, this is important language to us to make certain that grievances, if and when you file them, continue to move forward, so it really fixes the time clock from when the time limits run. So when we act on something, the clock's running on you. You know, it's like the professional chess game where, you know, everybody hits their clock on their side of the table. Your next move has to occur within the time period set forth in the contract. On the next page, above Article 15, this is part of the grievance section, the split of the fees, which I don't really think, you didn't indicate you really have a problem with that, but just want to emphasize that's important to us. Section 7, under believe.
Hang on.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The page, what page 21, I don't know which one. Anyway, above Article 15,
Uh-huh,
so this is Article 14.
right.
We put an asterisk or a star next to the paragraph that says all fees and expenses.
Yeah, that's the must-have part of this.
The one above that, so is your proposal, is that?
Well, I didn't think, it didn't sound like you had an issue with resolving arbitrability by written briefs, because then we don't have to meet and go through it. My
Well,
note
I think
on
we
it,
had more discussion about that than we had about splitting the fees for,
that's what I said, I didn't think you had an issue, but
okay.
our objective was to tell you the parts of the contract proposals that we've made to date that were must-haves for us, so that's why.
So I guess my question is, this is a must-have, but this one's not, right? Because there's no star next to it, I'm just trying to get some clarification.
We could probably live without it in the package deal. Funeral leave,
What changed in this? This looks like it's in the,
What's that, the funeral leave?
yes,
Well, there is no there's no breakdown right now of immediate and extended family, so this breaks it down.
Okay,
So right now, everybody's excluded, you don't have coverage for an aunt or an uncle or grandparent, you know what I mean, they're all excluded.
okay.
And
it's
so
right.
now we're saying, look, we're breaking
We
it
have
down into,
specific
here's immediate,
language
and here's,
to-
yeah.
okay.
And the reason that this is there is because this change is going to be in the career service manual, and we're trying to keep your contract consistent with the career service manual, and so if we didn't agree to it, then we would have the career service manual say one thing, this would say another thing, and then our supervisors would get confused as to, you know, well, which one is it, and we're trying to
We
keep
know your
everything.
supervisors get confused easily.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, Article 24 on past practice. This is the language that is important to us because there is a grievance pending over a past practice. The dispute is whether it's a past practice or not. So without knowing the outcome of that particular grievance, or without you reconsidering your position on it to close out this contract, withdrawing it, we're not insisting upon that, but you might want to consider that. We gotta have this past, we want this to be the last grievance over past practice. It's a different way of putting it. So therefore, there are none going forward.
So it's really
This
fixing
is-
grievance, it's just removing the concept, it just,
Well, because everything should already be in here. I mean, if we've
Yeah.
been meeting over the last 6 years, then every single thing that's come up should already be in the contract. I mean, the reason you put a past practice article in the initial contract is to cover things that you never anticipated in the first, you know, contract, which is generally a 3-year deal. The reality is, this will be our third version of a contract.
no, that's not true, Paul. That's your interpretation of your rule. But there's been practices that have been going on for 20-some odd years, which, 10 of which were covered by a collective bargaining agreement, and then the employer wakes up one day and decides they want to change the practice. So it's not
But you-
limited to the first-time contract, it's not.
You would have had recourse, though. Look, here's the deal. I mean, I've looked at the emails back and forth on this, and if you look at the strike-through language here that said, which I thought really helped us avoid fights over past practice. They had it existed substantially unvaried and interrupted for a significant period of time. So the grievance you've got going right now was varied and interrupted last
No, we
year.
don't agree.
All right, that's
We
the
have
point.
proof, we have proof.
That's the point.
We have proof so that brings us into the arena of the grievance. Okay, we have belief that we have proof that something was uninterrupted, and you say that it wasn't.
That's our only point, is that, you know, until that grievance is resolved, we're not prepared to close out the past practice. But you want to close the contract now, we're trying to figure out a way to do that. A is our answer to that in
You're
part.
trying to change something that's already in there, and we have past practice rights. Your theory of it only applies to a first-time contract is just flat out wrong. And the fact that we have a grievance over whether a past practice, that grievance will be flushed out one way or another.
And we'll wait till it's flushed out. I mean, that's fine with us, but, I mean, we then have to, we want to make sure that, we want to see which way it flushes out before we understand that we have to either define what unvaried and uninterrupted means, because if that's what's necessary, I mean, last year we did it a different way than it had been done in the past. Last year's way was consistent with the contract, but you're saying that last year, because it was only one time, it didn't count. And I'm very confused as to how that does not count. How doing it last year, the same way we're doing it this year, you're saying, oh, well, it was done 20 years a different way. Well, last year it was clearly varied and interrupted. So I don't understand how that doesn't count.
So I think your
I
action
understand
would,
you don't understand. I
Right,
get that.
of
And that's the
course.
reason why we're going to
Well, what is the word
potentially go on
uninterrupted
arbitration over
mean?
the case, because you don't, in my opinion, you don't understand how past practices work. That's just John's
Then
opinion.
you've got our proposal.
So if this language was never in there, would you argue that there are no past practice rights in collective bargaining? Is that your position?
I'd say that if they're there, you have to say what they are.
I said, my question was, if the language was never in the CBA, is it your position that the union would have no past practice rights?
let me jump in and also jump back. When we first started bargaining your first contract, I proposed language that said, there's no past practice that is monetary in nature unless it's incorporated in the collective bargaining agreement. And then we had a discussion over a series of meetings what was the list of those items? Let's have an article in the contract about them, so that there's no mystery, that there's not this backdrop. We know, and this is good for the county, because the county knows what they have to honor, and more importantly, what they have to budget for, because they're monetary in nature. Your grievance right now is an item that had it been addressed in the collective bargaining agreement, more specifically, and not relied upon past practice, we wouldn't be having a dispute, and there would have been funds appropriated for it. So,
Well, it wasn't the union's fault that the county decided to change the long-standing past practice. Listen, I don't really want to have this grievance hearing in the middle of bargaining.
No.
I understand your position. I asked a simple question twice. I haven't gotten an answer. Do I need to ask it a third time?
I'll maintain that your grievance should be based on the article itself. There's an emergency pay article, it's very clear in the contract. That is the way we're paying it. And your thing is, oh, well, it doesn't matter if the article says that, the past practice is that we didn't do it that way. And so my concern is that the past practice was that we never included holiday pay or vacation pay in the calculation of overtime until the contract was born, and then it says in there it counts. So why don't I get to go back and say, well, we shouldn't count annual leave in the calculation of overtime because for 25 years we never did it that way. Why don't I get to stop paying that? And the answer is because the contract says.
From what I've been told, that's not the fact. It wasn't until about the time the first contract came around that the county changed their practice.
Okay.
And so we had to get contract language to preserve the practice. So you got these stories wrong.
The contract language says that you can flex your schedule and that you don't get paid. You have to use leave if you don't work. And not only that, but that's what we did last year. Last year during Hurricane Hermine, and I showed you emails.
We're talking about two different things. We're getting back to the grievance.
Well,
you just made a point, and I disagree with you. You're saying that for 25 years we've never paid time and a half on hours worked. We use an example for annual leave. And I'm telling you, you're wrong.
Okay,
All those years it was paid, until all of a sudden Simone came up with the idea that I don't want to pay it anymore, and then so we had to get it in the contract to preserve it. So your story's upside down.
all right. Well, in any case, my point is that you get things into the contract and you change things via the contract. And like I said, the emergency pay article is clear. And so you're trying to say, well, I'm not going to use the emergency pay article because I want to use past practice, even though last year it was done the way we did it this
Okay,
year.
but the reason I asked the same question several times in a row, what is your position not, if the contract is silent on the concept of past practices, do you believe that past practice rights don't exist?
Well,
I keep asking that same question, I'm not getting an answer.
Well, if it's a management right, I think we get to change it, and then if it's a term and condition of employment, you can impact bargain something if you believe that it has an impact to the bargaining
So let me
right.
guess, your answer is no. Your answer is no.
no, I
that
think
there
that's
are
a
no
good
past
generic
practices.
answer to a very generic question.
It's not a generic question, it's a pretty pointed question. Do you believe that past practice rights exist when the contract's silent on whether it says anything at all about past practices? Do you believe the concept exists, that it's enforceable? And I believe what I just heard is like, no, it doesn't exist. And so you think by removing this language in there, there's no concept of bargaining or grievance.
Well, the fact is we have the language in the contract.
Right, and we won't leave it
addressing
in there. And the fact that you're removing it is now you're going to argue during arbitration, oh, Mr. Arbitrator, I'm sorry, there are no past practice rights for
That's
this
right.
particular group.
Right.
There used to be, but they're not anymore, because look at this proposal, the union just signed
I'm
up.
okay with that, because what I would say is, the reason that language is there is because if you flip back to Article 13, we've addressed it.
Right.
Okay?
Under employee performance evaluation.
And you've had years and years now to identify what the past practices
What
are
is-
that
I
you
don't
want in the
understand what
contract.
employee performance evaluation is.
I'm
He
making
was
up,
making
I'm
a
making,
number
I'm
up.
just
He was
using
just
that
saying.
somewhere. Just
Right.
whatever the number is. Article 88.
We can't possibly, I'm sure you can at least agree on this, can't possibly list every single thing that goes on, every single place of the county that is something that's considered a practice. We can't, unless we have a phone book, thick contract. And so there could be practices that have been going on, like I said earlier, for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and they're continuing, and it never,
And if it affects
it's
the
light is never
wages,
shown on it
conditions of
until all of a sudden the
employment.
county wants to decide they want to stop doing something.
But you have the recourse by simply declaring impact bargaining. I mean, that's easy.
I don't need an impact bargain.
John,
If you're
it's
taking
a-
away something that they currently enjoy, that's a past practice violation.
John, my response to your question is, yes, we're trying to extinguish all of those.
I know what
And
you're,
but at the same time, we're willing to add the appropriate ones into the contract through bargaining.
but to listen to Barbara's theory, that this language only applies to a first-time contract, it's insulting as we get
No,
this.
I think her point was that when the contract came into play, it by its very nature extinguished a number of past practices, clearly the ones that were specifically identified in the document. And that's the one that she
Right.
applied with respect to the storms.
And you always have the recourse to have impact bargaining or
Where does impact
to,
bargaining end up?
what's that?
Where does impact bargaining end up? When you don't agree, where does it end up?
Well, we
Have you thought about it?
It,
Oh, I see.
Certainly not arbitration, is it?
no,
Okay, so it means it's a moot point. It's an exercise of futility. So when you have a grievance that you file and you disagree on, guess where it ends up? In arbitration. So you get a decision, a binding decision, one that the county has to abide by, considering the union proved their point. So impact bargaining is useless. It's a waste of time. It's an act of futility where having past practice rights that you can grieve is enforceable. So that's the difference.
Well, and it also is our right to address articles in the contract as they come up when we determine that they need to be addressed. So this is one of our proposals this year.
I understand.
all right, Article 42. The language here is must-have language for us, and we've done our best to identify those points that we have to have so that you can consider them and help us figure out a way to close out the contract by addressing those. You know, if there's issues in there that it's a matter of working on the language, we'll work on the language, but we wanted to help you identify our objectives that we're directed to obtain. We can't get a contract ratified on our side of the table unless we.
Well, I'm not convinced we can get it ratified on our side of the table either.
Right, but unlike you, what we want to do is we want to go to the Board of County Commissioners and say, here's the contract we negotiated, we support it, we ask you to ratify it. We're not gonna,
Well, you're not gonna do that until the members ratify it first,
That's right.
right? So if the members ratify it first, that's what you should do, and that's what you have to do. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't. So if you tentatively agree to something, and then the members ratify it, of course you'd be bringing it to the board and saying you have a recommendation, an endorsement. But we're not there yet. We're not at that point. So when you make that comment, unlike you, this is what we're going to do, it's because we haven't determined whether or not the employees actually are willing to accept it.
I think we have some more work to do. I think we have to take these issues that we've just talked about and make sure that the contract that we're prepared to each sign off on is properly addressed, worded, so forth and so on. As we do that process, we may have some tweaks to it. We might make some concessions to it. Correspondingly, we might harden some of it. But we're prepared to do that as part of the ongoing bargaining process. If time is of essence to you, we'll work on that document and be prepared to meet with you and talk about it. Maybe it's a document we can just send to you in advance of having to meet. And you might look at it and say, we'll go with it. Or we still need to talk about 4 of the articles you proposed. You tell us what you want to do. You're the one that's driven by some sense of urgency on it. We want to get it done, but we don't have a sense of urgency to get it done. We're being candid with you. We want it right. We don't want it quick.
Okay? Absolutely.
So you don't have to respond to any of that now. We can take a break. We could end for the day. We could schedule another session.
Schedule
That's what
another
you want to do.
session. And, like I said, it should be after the hearing, because we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, I think probably that's for today.
So are we on to picking a date? Is that what we're doing? Because if we are, I'll end the discussion. I'll end the recording, and then we'll just work on the mechanics.
Yeah, I guess it wouldn't hurt for today.
Okay, so that's the end of today's bargaining session. And we're ending at 12:35. start looking.